All right, so it's time for my monologue this morning on this wonderful Coffee Time talk show. So here we go. Did you see the latest Coffee Time Wisconsin newspaper article with Coffee Time Wisconsin's accountant, Mr. Coffee Numbers? Mr. Numbers wrote a column this week on the art of accounting. That had to be a good article. Mr. Coffee Numbers said, when you make a mistake of adding the date to the right side of your statement, you must add it to the left side also. Also, this week in the Coffee Time Wisconsin newspaper advice column expert Decaffeinated Cindy said that advice is a lot like getting a kiss on the forehead. It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't help much either.
Ah.
Yes. Now, here's a word from our announcer, Pastor Cliff.
Hit some music, Harriet. Today's Coffee Time talk show with Bob is brought to you by Paul Marshall's Appliance Service of Coffee Time, Wisconsin. Any appliance for a limited time that is fixed by Paul, he'll give you his new 10-song single, I Sing About Appliances by Paul Marshall. Songs include The Old Gray Oven Doesn't Heat Like It Used to. Back to you, Bob.
Yeah, one of my favorite songs on that album from Paul Marshall is The Vacuum Cleaner Has a Dirty Job. They just don't write songs like that anymore, Pastor Cliff.
No, they don't.
Now, it's time for our two guests today on Coffee Time Talk Show. With me, Robert Bob, that is. As you know, it is Law Enforcement Week in Coffee Time, Wisconsin, and Coffee Time County. Here they are, Sheriff Larry of Coffee Time County and the Chief of Police Kim of the City of Coffee Time, Wisconsin. Welcome, officers. It's an honor to have you here on the Coffee Time.
Oh, hit it, Harriet, as we welcome our guest. They're undercover. They don't even have their badges on today there, Bob.
Well, Bob, on behalf of the men and women of Coffee Time County Sheriff's Department, thank you for having me. It is indeed an honor.
Well, Sheriff Larry, as I understand it, you're the only officer in the Sheriff's Department.
Now that you mention it, Bob, I guess you're right. I never really noticed. I guess I'm just too busy fighting crime in Coffee Time County.
On behalf of my two deputies, Carlton and Nolan, it's an honor to be the represent the Coffee Time Wisconsin City Police Department on Law Enforcement Week, right here on the Coffee Time Wisconsin Talk Show.
All right, now we're going to get back on track. Chief Kim, is it true that your two deputies, Carlton and Nolan, are under 18? And if so, how can that be? I thought you had to be at least 18 to be a police officer.
Huh, you might be right, Bob. I never had time to read the rule book yet.
Well, let me start with you, Sheriff Larry. How have you... You have been sheriff now in Coffee Time County for 2 years. What made you want to run and become sheriff?
Well, I wanted to stop the crime and corruption going on in Coffee Time County. The previous sheriff was too weak on crime, Bob. It was time for a change.
Well, Sheriff Larry, what do you think was the biggest accomplishment you have made in the 2 years as sheriff in cracking down on crime in Coffee Time County?
I hate to say it, but people like Keyboard Harriet here selling decorated coffee beans without a license out of her art studio from home. I am happy to report that Keyboard Harriet's decorated coffee bean company has had a license for 2 years now.
Keyboard Harriet, I thought I knew you. I'm shocked. Sheriff Larry, how did Harriet take it when you told her that she had to pay for a business license every year for her business out of her home?
She took it pretty well. You see, Bob, I pay for the $60 license every year for her out of my own pocket. After all, I could not charge her. She is such a sweet lady and brings her homemade coffee ground pie each week to the Sheriff's Department.
Keyboard Harriet brings me her secret recipe of split coffee and bean casserole every month. We need more citizens like Keyboard Harriet, Bob.
You know, we're bringing you back every week because you're so good at this. We're not going to let this go. Might I add, Keyboard Harriet makes me her special coffee, filtered chocolate malts, every week here at Coffee Time Wisconsin TV studio. Let me ask you now, Chief Kim, why did you run for police chief of Coffee Time Wisconsin 3 years ago?
Well, Bob, I've always been a fan of the TV police shows. I always wanted someday to be Barney Fife and Rambo, all rolled into one.
Wow, Chief Kim, I don't think Rambo was a police officer.
No, Bob, Rambo was not a police officer, but he sure should have been.
Chief Kim, what has been your greatest accomplishment as the Chief of Police, Coffee Time, Wisconsin, of the Coffee Time, Wisconsin community for the last 3 years?
Well, Bob, I'm proud to say that I've been able to stop the gang that was going on in Coffee Time, Wisconsin for the past 10 years.
Well, if any of our viewers are new to Coffee Time, Wisconsin, or this talk show, about 2 years ago, Chief Kim stopped gang tension, as I said earlier, going on between the decaffeinated gang in the north part of the city and the decaffeinated gang in the south side of the city. How, Chief Kim, did you stop the coffee wars between these two gangs? I always wanted to know.
Well, Bob, I sat down the two leaders of the decaffeinated gang and the decaffeinated gang in my office, and I said, listen, you guys, if you don't start respecting each other's differences, I'm going to enforce martial law and ban coffee altogether in Coffee Time, Wisconsin. And then everyone will blame you. Let me tell you, Bob, it worked.
I did not know, Chief Kim, that you, as a police chief, had the authority to enforce martial law and ban coffee.
Well, Bob, I don't, but they didn't know that.
Wow, Chief Kim, I could see you being governor someday. Let me now ask both of you, have you ever been to had to shoot your gun in the line of duty?
One time, Bob, and one time only.
Sheriff Larry, it must have been a very nervous time when you had to shoot that gun. Your adrenaline must have been pumping.
I'll say it was, Bob. Took 6 months for my foot to heal.
As for me, Bob, I don't carry a gun. I find a slingshot much more effective instead.
But Chief Kim, how is a slingshot going to help you in a bank robber situation or an all-out shootout situation?
Huh. You know, Bob, I never thought about that. I'll have to consider what you just said.
All right, last question for both of you here on Law Enforcement Week here in Coffee Time County and City. How important is it for a person to follow the law and really respect law enforcement?
Well, Bob, Romans 13, 1 through 5 tells us, let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive his approval, for he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore one must be in subjection, not only to avoid God's wrath, but also for the sake of conscience. Bob, we really cannot respect God if we don't first respect those he has put in authority over us. There are times when we have to take a loving stand against rulers who go off God's plan for our country, but disrespect should never be an option for a Christian or any citizen of this great country.
1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13 to 17 says, be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether it be to the emperor as supreme or to governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. You see, Bob, God wants us as Christians to be a Christ-like example to all those around us, including those who are in authority. And those who are in authority should be just as respectful to those who they serve.
Folks, we've had a lot of fun this week on Coffee Time Talk Show. But seriously, we do honor and respect all our police everywhere who are doing their best to serve the communities with a good heart. Thank you, Chief Kim. Thank you, Sheriff Lar. And thank you, Keyboard Harriet.
It's my spelling mistake.
And I thought it was serious. And I hear that you, Keyboard Harriet, will soon have your Cooking with Coffee cookbook out soon. Join us next week for Marge the Librarian and Lori the Librarian in training. This is Bob Robert Bob for Coffee Time Wisconsin Talk Show. So long. When you pray, will you pray for me? For